Meet Romeo, a 4-year-old thoroughbred that just 6 months ago was starved by his previous owner and sent to slaughter. I decided to take him on as a project, and he has bloomed and become a promising show jumping prospect. The road to recovery hasn't been straight, with a very steep learning curve, and I hope you enjoy his transformation. Just a quick disclaimer, rescuing a horse is not cheap, and I do as I'm passionate about horses and saving animals. I decided to adopt Romeo in September 2023 from a woman in Texas. I found him in a Facebook group. It was like Texas Project Horses for Sale or something like that. This woman had rescued him from slaughter 3 weeks earlier. He was very thin and wasn't doing too good. He had some thrush on his back feet. Apart from that, all of his legs were clean. I didn't do a vet check. I was prepared to lose my investment of $1,000 plus the $1,200 to have him shipped to California. I did find his one and only race online. I'm not sure why he was retired, and I don't know why they starved him before sending him to slaughter. So the first month I had him, he was turned out in a pasture at my friend's barn here in San Diego. They free feed hay, and I did a vet checkup, and I did his vaccinations. He was coughing, and he had a runny nose, and he didn't have much of an appetite. He would eat hay and a little bit of grain, but mostly just stand and sleep, and he was kind of depressed. He had scars all over his body, and you could see his ribs, his shoulders, hip bones, and he was barefoot, and his feet were trimmed very short, so he was pretty uncomfortable walking. After 3 weeks of unlimited hay, and I also used Neutrogena Pro Force Fuel, I brought him to my other barn that's a little bit closer to me, so I could give him more attention and let his bite wounds heal and start working him on the ground a little bit. He was used to tack as he was a racehorse, but he didn't know how to lunge or any ground manners. The first thing I usually teach my horses is to respect your space on the ground, to back up, yield to pressure, and he was super smart and picked it up straight away. Once he got shoes on, I was able to start lunging him, and I sat on him a couple of times in walk, and he didn't care at all. He's a super sweet, gentle soul, and after 4 weeks of training him, I put him out in another 1-month pasture break to gain more weight, and I also traveled overseas during this time. When I came back in November, after a month of free feed of hay and pasture time, he looked like a new horse. I also started riding him off the lunge line now, and I was able to ride him like a normal horse end of November, so we could do walk, trot, canter, turning, halts, etc. No problem at all. He was very unbalanced, obviously, but very willing. I did lunge him 2 to 3 days a week to build strength without a rider on his back. In December, I started jumping him under saddle. He was already used to being lunged over poles and cavalettes on the lunge line, so the introduction to jumping him under saddle was very easy. We joined some girls to cross-country schooling in Copper Meadows twice. The first time we just rode around, and I followed another horse, and we just watched everyone else jump. He was nervous, and he was still getting used to horses cantering around him, which was his biggest fear. He was very scared when there was a horse cantering up behind him, especially. The second time, he was much more relaxed, and he remembered this is where I can eat grass, so we jumped some intro jumps and just hung out and walked around and ate some grass. I then went to Florida for 3 weeks, and the day before I left, I made a mistake and I tried to trail ride him alone. And this ended up being a little bit too early in his training because he was good on trails, but he didn't want to leave other horses. And I'm a strong believer, just ask yes questions when you train a horse. I didn't do that. So I was rushing his training a little bit. Yeah, this time when I tried to trail ride him alone, he would rear, like do a small rear and try to go home. I was able to work through it, but since this was our last ride before I left for 3 weeks, he kind of remembered this, which ended up a little bit of a problem. So when I came back and started the first ride, he hadn't really been ridden. He'd just been turned out and lunged a little bit, and he remembered. Like, he started rearing and bucking as soon as I got on. I fixed this problem pretty quickly by long lining him on trail rides by himself, so then if he would rear, it wouldn't put himself or me in danger. First one, he was fighting it a little bit, and he would try to rear and go home, and then the second one, he would probably just fight maybe once or twice, and then the third time, he would just do it no problem at all. And now I try to just trail ride with people. He can trail ride alone now, but I'm still going to wait a little bit longer just to make sure. And then we took him for another training day at Copper Meadows. This time we jumped him some beginner novice jumps. He was pretty forward and stronger than I'm used to. And my trainer recommended Mullen rubber bit instead, just because he wasn't very soft in the mouth. Obviously, we have a lot of flat work to do just because he's only been in training for a couple of months. At the end of January, I signed him up to like the Boyd Martin clinic. He's an Olympic rider in eventing. And I knew this was very early in our training, but I asked the organizer if I could just come and do intro. And she said, yes, that's no problem at all. And I was very lucky because the other girl who was doing intro, she couldn't make it. So I had a private lesson with Boyd Martin and he was very impressed. Romeo was a superstar. We couldn't get the right lead canner in the warm up. It's his weak side. But then once we got going jumping, he was flying over the jumps and Boyd was very, very impressed with my work with him. So show jumping, he was amazing. And then cross country, we had some issues. So it was a very windy day. They put me in a group with 7 other horses. It was cold, windy, all the horses were nervous, and this was a beginner novice group and I had signed up to do intro, but then because he did so good, everyone was like, no, you'll be fine in beginner novice. It wasn't really the jumps that were the problem. He was just very overwhelmed by the wind and all the nervous horse energy around him. So we started off okay. All the exercises and the jumps that everyone was doing did have to warm him up like 30 minutes just to release some of the stress energy. Boyd told me to jump this jump going away from the group, and as I told you, like we have a problem leaving the herd. So this was a little bit too early in his training, but we did try to jump away from the herd and it didn't work. He would go back to his rearing problem. Because we were under time pressure, we couldn't really fix it. We basically had to stay at one area jumping and then move on to the next jump. So we moved on from water jumps to logs, and like, it's only a 1.5 hour lesson with 7 riders. Like, he wants everyone to have a go. So it was not a good experience for Romeo. We basically ended up refusing at all the jumps in the end. Both me and Romeo learned a lot. Like, I learned not to rush the training. I wasn't worried about it. I knew he would jump well when he was calm, but it was just a very stressed day. Since then, we went home. We did a lot of trail rides, flat work, we built his strength on the ground, we did jumping at home, and no problem rearing at all. I did put Romeo out on another pasture break in February, and I'm going to bring him back into work now mid-April. So he's been in pasture for 2 months just to be a horse, build more strength. And I've seen him a couple of times. I rode him twice and he is looking amazing. And he started off exactly where we left off. My sisters rode him and we jumped him on the lunge line, just a little tiny cross trail, and he was super. So very excited to bring him back into work now. He's so cute, so I'm very tempted to keep him for myself. But keeping a horse in California is very expensive, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up selling him at the end of the year. I know I won't be able to get my money back because I've already spent around $12,000 on his rehab, including board, vet bills, lessons, etc. So I'm hoping I can find him a forever home later this year. Yeah, I'm just very excited because he's so cute. He's really fancy thoroughbred. He has a good brain. He learns quickly. And I'm planning to do another video in another 3 months on his update on his training.